Good afternoon. Thank you so much all for coming. It's obviously been an incredibly emotional and majestic few days, and the importance of tradition and how we do things, I think, has never been more incredibly expressed. So the fact that here this week we're celebrating the hand of the maker, and we're talking about how we should do things and why we do things in the way that people have done for generations, I think is incredibly apt. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce Malte Gormsen, who does things the right way. And he's going to talk about the pieces that we've managed to bring here. There's a lot more that we obviously can't show you, so we've got some beautiful books here as well, and he'll be here to talk to you at the end of this short conversation, really, about making and traditions. I'm also introducing my husband, which sounds a little bit strange, but and I'm also apologising for not being Emma Crichton-Miller. She unfortunately wasn't well enough to be with us today, so I hope you bear with me if I stumble today. So Staffan founded Tollgard 17 years ago. We started out doing interior design and gradually realized that as he met more and more makers and more incredible brands, that he really needed a place to house them. So we sort of joke that he is the only person I know who comes back from abroad with a new maker in his hand luggage. So, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So, I suppose we should start, Malte, at the beginning, please, about your education and how you came to learn from one of the finest cabinet makers about how to do things the right way.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I started as very young. I always knew that I was going to be a cabinet maker, and I was 15 years old when I started out the dream of being a cabinet maker, and always knew that my way is going to be craftsmanship. Early on, when I started my apprenticeship when I was 17 years old, and in Denmark we have a strong tradition for apprenticeships. It takes approximately 4 years to be a craftsman, and I was so lucky that actually I had my apprenticeship with a cabinet maker named Niels Andersen, where it was one of the last, I would say it's one of the last places in Copenhagen where they're doing the things, the pieces that the way it should be done. What we did was we worked with vinyl early on. It wasn't many pieces. We only 6 people in the workshop, and at that time in the 90s, vinyl was a very small thing. You know, people had forgot him. They didn't know anything about it. So he, had these old architects he collected, and then the Japan got the eyes up for the Danish craftsmanship, and that went on to, that we actually was possible for us to produce these things, but it was not more than 3 to 4 containers a year of vinyl furniture. That was it at that time. But everything what we did was that we followed the furniture all the way from the lock all the way through. So that's very rare that you are able to do that in a furniture production. I won't say it wasn't a production; it was a workshop. So that's basically my background, and I have a very strong connection to Niels, and we still talk a lot about the way we do things. So.
And what would you say are the most important, either techniques or values that you take from your apprenticeship and from what you learned from him?
I would say that how do we express that? That it's not about when you grow up, and to have the furniture tradition. It's more like, it's not something. Of course, you learn a lot of techniques, but it's also something that you need to grow with, and it's going to be on your backbone. It's something that needs to follow you all the time. You also need to think like a craftsman in everything, from you start from the beginning of the material till the end, and you need to be able to go in and select all the time. You need to be very critic in what you're doing. I would say that's it's more like a, what you call that,
like an attitude.
Yeah, like an attitude, or it's something that you grow up with, like learning from your background, from your. It would be the same thing if you go to your, when you grew up with your parents, that they have one way of doing things. It's kind of the same relationship.
Yeah.
And so you started your studio 25 years ago?
Yes, approximately 25 years ago, yeah.
And so, it's funny, when Staffan and I started he started the studio 17 years ago, and our business plan was don't go bankrupt.
Yeah.
So can you put yours, did you have one mantra or one guiding thought?
Yeah, I think it was, when I started out, it was, everybody else was closing down furniture production in Copenhagen and moving it out, because it wasn't really possible to meet the market and meet the prices on the level that you wanted, because the craftsmanship was disappearing a little bit. Unless you really had a name, it was very, very hard. And even the big names were moving their productions out. So the craftsmanships were disappearing. And a lot of people struggled for the next, I would say, 20 years. And then, what I did, that I thought I could go out and produce furniture. That was very hard and maybe a little bit naive at that time. But what I did was that I got into projects, so we started doing projects. It could be restaurants, it could be closed shops. We did a lot of shop fitting and all kind of stuff, private homes, which we grew with, and the projects got better and better, and we met up with good architects and teamed up with good architects, which brought us into the different projects. And I think I had a strong belief on that we always could do a piece of furniture for the project, and because that's what I loved the most. So it was always be very nice to have a special piece in the projects. But of course, it was a little bit hard, a little bit naive also, because it was also something we will lose money on.
Even in projects.
Even in projects, and then there was other things in projects that made it happen. But I think today we pulled out a lot of the furniture we have in our collection today is pulled out of these projects, where we went in 5-6 years ago and took out a lot of the pieces which we really loved.
And Staffan, do you have a favorite project or piece?
I do. I mean,
Well, take us back first. Sorry, I leapfrogged.
I'll start with the piece. I mean, it's probably Malte's favorite piece as well, because it just won a big prize in Denmark. But he's done this beautiful wardrobe, which if I ever get enough money, I will try and buy for my own home. But it's an extraordinary piece, and that exemplifies everything that Malte talks about, and the old techniques of making, being completely honest, not cheating, not allowing yourself to do any shortcuts, and that's manifested in this beautiful piece, which must take quite a few hours to make. I would have thought, but going back, you're right. It's hard for me to go somewhere, experience something unique, and then not want to bring it home. And that was the same thing here. It's when you find someone who defies, the kind of market by holding very, very firm certain values and certain ways of making things, and then it better work because that's the way I'm going to do things, then you can't but respect that. So when that also works with my own aesthetic, my heritage, coming from Scandinavia, then it's a kind of a match that I look for. So we've been talking for about 18 months, and this is the first step of many.
So Malte, can you tell us a little bit, you mentioned to me that where you work is very particularly located. I mean, you're in Copenhagen, there are about 30 of you.
Yes.
Okay, to tell us about your workshop and how things start.
The workshop, we are proud, we have probably 30 people, 35 people. It goes a little bit up and down. But what we do is that we have everything in our own workshop. We produce everything in Copenhagen, and we like to start with the beginning. We have architects, we have the production drawing, but a lot of the pieces start with that we draw something ourselves, or we have architects come in. It could be Space Copenhagen, which have designed the most of the pieces here.
And for restaurants and hotels.
For restaurants and hotels, and then it's pulled out. But what we do is that we have the whole production. Of course, we have a lot of machinery that's very necessary to produce something at all. We can say that it's probably the most expensive place to produce at all is Copenhagen, because everybody has quite high wages and everything is quite expensive. But I also believe that that's what makes it meaningful, that everybody is treated very right, and has a good life. And that you can keep those craft traditions that you learned that go back 400 years. Yes, we have. Yeah, we have these very strong traditions about our craftsmanship, and we have this community or this guild that's 470 years old. Which is about the craftsmanship and the cabinet makers guild in Copenhagen. So that's quite strong. Of course, that have been dying a bit out, but now it's coming back, and we have this quite strong feeling about how we do things. It's when we work with our furniture, we don't use lacquers or varnishes. We only use oil. We need to have it needs to be very clear that you can see the grains of the wood. You need to feel the wood all the way through when the finished product. It's very important that you can feel the craftsmanship, that you also, it's not just a machine run over. We have a lot of man hours in all our furnitures. We have a lot of sanding and polishing going on. I would say that's the biggest part of it all.
I was learning about the finishes today, and you can see we've got a selection of different finishes, but one of the finishes that's a grey oak takes 7 coats of this oil, so that there's a huge difference if you want the piece in a natural oak, in the dark, in the steamed. For us to understand that when we're trying to explain to someone, this piece is this investment and this piece is 2x investment. It's hugely important for us to be able to explain why the human hand, the maker's hand, adds to the investment.
Yeah. And there's also, when we work with the colors of the wood, we like the oak a lot, but of course we also like other wood types. But the oak, what we like about the oak, that we have the acid, which allow us to do a natural coloring of the oak. When you see the dark color with the chair I'm sitting on here, and behind me here, it's actually the oak's natural color. We go in and treat it. You have acid in the oak, and then you treat it with a base. Then you can actually put out this color. So the color won't be like it's painted. It won't be a straight-on color, which only where we correct it. So it'll be a little bit different every time we do it, and it will also go from this dark color to a little bit more brown over the years. So it'll be something that wear and tear very nicely. So that's very important for us. When you go in and turn our furniture around, when you look at our dining table for putting 8 plates, then you find out that the drawers, the slides inside, they're not made from an iron slide, which is something you just buy and put in. It's made from oak with small darkened brass brackets, and so you actually grow to love your furniture more when you open them and use them.
They're like little secrets.
Yes.
You were showing us a table that extends earlier today.
Yeah.
And I love the idea that even in something so functional as just making a table bigger, as you open it, you find the hand of the maker, even somewhere invisible. I think there's something akin to fashion. You know, when you turn over a couture piece, you understand why it cost and how it's going to last. You told me an amazing story about, I think, the chair that you're sitting on.
This one you're sitting in, yeah.
Perfect. So this was, where was it made?
It was made for the restaurant 108 Space Copenhagen brought it for the restaurant. And it's a piece that was made for they had like this coffee shop which is open from 7 in the morning till 1 o'clock at night. And those people sitting there from, all the time, it was always full. And after 7 years, we could just take them out to the workshop, take them apart, glue them back together, and then they went on. So it's very rare that a bar stool actually is getting wear that much. That will maybe 150 years wear in a normal environment, and you will always take our furniture back to the workshop and refinish them or get a touch up. So it's something that will last you for a very long time.
And do you think that ethos is what you learn as a cabinet maker? You learn how to make things that can be
It should be something that it should be fixed. It's something that should go on and have a new life after even it's 100 years old. You should take it apart and just fix it up and take it back, put it back together.
I wanted to ask Staffan, then I realised I only have one microphone. But this idea of Scandinavian luxury, do you think that's how, if you like, a more humble or hard-working group of countries finds luxury in its longevity?
Yes, because I think Scandinavian luxury is almost a contradiction in terms. You know, there are definition, or the world's definition of luxury always changes, and it's a horrible word anyway, which I don't like, but often in the last 20 years it's often meant very glossy things, very shiny things, often involving kind of gluing diamante onto things and so on. You know, the most kind of, what I think, the most overly decorative design. And I think I don't know if it's luxury, but this kind of sense of authenticity and being honest, showing how you put something together, taking pride in the joints of how it's made, how it's put together, is, I think, has become more appreciated with time. And it's only in the last 10 years where I think that's become the kind of new luxury, as it were. The investment in the time that it takes to make it, the story of the product, the story of the maker, and the material itself. And I think that added up, making solid wooden furniture in Copenhagen is expensive. The product will end up being expensive, and that's the luxury, not because it looks shiny and glossy and will go out of fashion in the next year. These are pieces, like Malte said, you can refinish them. They can have a second life if they've been around for a long time. And I think the cabinet in particular that I mentioned, but these pieces as well, the luxury of today is surely to be able to say, you know, these pieces are going to be with my kids and my grandkids as well. So I think we've all kind of rethought a little bit what luxury is. And
I think for me, speaking to Malte this morning, I realised how in recent years the mark of the designer has become super important. You know, and they go from brand to brand, you know, sort of sprinkling their stardust. And what we were discussing is actually that didn't used to be the case. It was the maker who was important. It was the maker who actually gave these pieces their worth, because that's what's going to make it last.
Yeah, that's right. We were discussing this and we're telling about that. Actually, what's the Danish design, where you have the Danish craftsmanship and the Danish design during the 40s and 50s and 60s, where most of us know all the different architects, but actually what it comes from is actually was the makers that pulled out the architects. It was not still all the way. It was actually in the beginning, the first 30 years was the makers that was pulling out the architects. Today it was turning around, so it's about the architects and not where it's produced and who produced it. It's actually more about the architect, but we feel that we need to pull out the production. It's very important. We need the architect, but we also need to be aware of where everything is produced and who is producing it and how it's done.
And how they're educated.
Yes, and also how they're educated. So you can take that, making that will have a future. That's very, very important.
And so, not just ensuring that your apprentices have this 4-year education, this learning process, not just giving pieces 7 coats of lacquer and making sure that everything has this ability to live through generations. You're actually starting by planting trees. That's how far back you want to go.
Yeah, we are part of a small forest area where we have one of our workshops. And what we have started there is actually we are getting our own trees. So it's where we are cutting trees now is only 20 minutes from our workshop. So, but we can of course not do that all the time. It's something we do special and something we just started. But it's also we're talking about walnut and said we were looking at a piece of walnut over here and we're speaking about that we cannot get from Denmark. That's not true. We can actually, just 2 years ago, they just planted just outside our door a piece of walnut forest, which, it's going to be ready in 70 years, but we can probably wait for that. But we need to know and we need to be aware of this material, that all the materials we use, it takes time. You see, the trees we're sitting in here, the oak, it's probably 200 years old before we are allowed to use it. So we need to be very much aware of what we're doing and how much we are using, actually. And we need to use every piece, and that's what we like to say is very beautiful about we are taking down our own trees. Because when we go and just buy the oak, we'll get it in big logs, and big straight logs. But when we do it ourselves, we can actually use every branch, everything, and we will direct it from the beginning to a chair leg. So we'll cut in small pieces because, okay, here we can find with us 60 centimeters. Okay, that can be cut up to legs. So we're already directed from that time to the end product. But of course, there will maybe be 4 years before it is a chair leg. But I think that's very important. And then we end up with a very little bit of waste.
It's true sustainability,
yes.
Actually, when you start from cutting, if you like, from the tree. Again, I come back to this kind of idea of a tailor with a bolt of cloth, is you get to use all of it. Yeah. And everything, I mean, I suppose the metal will take some time to return to something else, but everything can be.
I would say that wood is one of the few materials, or maybe the only material we actually we can keep on sourcing on. If we find stone, that will stop when there's not any more of that stone. There's not many more. But if we treat the forest right, we will keep having that material. I think that's very important.
We talked a little bit about finite and infinite resources, and it struck me that actually the cabinet maker is a finite resource. Unless you invest in this tradition and this process, and in the education of how we do things, that those traditions will die. Yeah. And so I suppose that's what you set out to do when you started, was to maintain something.
It was to maintain the tradition, and also because I love the tradition, I love all the old techniques, but combined it with the new techniques. Of course, we are not, we should be craftsmen, we should also be wise. We shouldn't just do everything as we did it back in the days, but we need to know all the old techniques to bring it and digitalize into the digitalization. That's a difficult word. So it's very important that we can do it by hand, but to be able to transmit it into a modern world.
Actually, to add to that, I think that's the balance between using old techniques but with contemporary design is what I think you've done amazingly in your projects, and what is being brought to life in the pieces that we have around us, and the rest of your library as well. But this idea that it's if you look at these pieces, they're very much modern. They're of the now, but the techniques that you use to make them is 100 years old or more. So I think that balance is what creates a really interesting piece. It's the balance of contemporary and traditional.
And just to go back, I think 200 years maybe, I would just like you to tell me the story again of
we will just
the monolith.
Of this log here
Yeah.
is a piece of the defense of Copenhagen, and in 1801 the British people came and said, now it's enough with Denmark, they're making so much noise, and they're sending out the warships all the time and making a lot of trouble. So in 1801 the British came to finalize this, and they took the whole British fleet to Copenhagen and they made an attack. When that happened, to try to defend Copenhagen, a guy called Willemoes, he was only 16 years old, took out the bridges. There was the bridges which was where we had the warships lying at, and there was those floating bridges,
like the docks.
Like the docks, yeah. And he took those and took them out in the harbor, put cannons on them to defend Copenhagen. Actually, it didn't went that well for Copenhagen or for Denmark. Britain stole the whole fleet, so all the warships the Denmark had, they were gone. So, and then to just make a short note on that, and then the king actually, he was okay, let's build some new ships, but then they discovered that they actually didn't have any oak left in Denmark because they built ships of it all and they didn't plant new. So the oak we're using today is actually 200 years old, but it's from that time, from that end of that war where we lost all the ships, that was planted. That's the oak we use today in Denmark. So, but leading to that piece there is a piece of those bridges was defending Copenhagen. They were found and they've been lying in the water until late 70s in Copenhagen, just pushed aside. Then there was some people, they came and found it and took it up. They imagined that they could produce furniture from it because that would be very nice. But then that didn't really happen, and then they forgot them. And then I found it 10 years ago. And what we did was that I just put it in my stock, and then we went about what to do with this. And at some point I spoke to the guys from Noma, and I said, I have this, if you ever want to do something, just you just need to shout. And then that went 4 years, and then suddenly the Noma was closed and opened up again as a new Noma. We were part of that project also. And then René, which is the head chef, said, everything is too new here, what can we do? And then we went to my basement and he saw all this wood, and then we pulled out some logs. So if you go to Noma, you will see these sculptures standing in the restaurant. It's basically like that. And you see the waiter station and tables made from that wood. So that's part of it.
It's almost like the ghosts of the trees.
Yes.
Are there. And I think that draws a really nice thread through Majesty, bringing it back to things that endure, why we do things the way that we do. If we haven't touched on something that you've seen here and that you'd like to ask a question about, please put your hand up now. Or if we don't have any questions, I know Malte will be very happy to answer afterwards. Yes?
I was just wondering what your ambition is with the future of business. So is it to work with designers to produce pieces for them, or is it to self-design your own pieces and produce them?
I was.
Mixture of both?
I would say it's going to be a nice mix of both. I think we will fill out where we can, but we really like to work with designers, and we have strong relationships with designers we really like to work with. So I think we will keep going in that direction and create new pieces for projects and pull them out. Or if we feel we are missing something, we will fill that hole with nice pieces. So, but I think the future, our goal is not to make a huge company. It's actually to do something we love. It's not to, just expand the production. It still needs to be a workshop. So it's very much about craft. So if we can't feel the craftsmanship, it's probably not for us.
Thanks, Marcus. Yes.
So the other question, I see 2 points in your, I don't know your answer, sorry if I am making a very precipitated statement, but I see 2 things, right? I see tradition in the making, and I see tradition in the style, right? It's those 2 things, right? Basically, very old ways of putting the wood together, and aesthetic that is referring to modernity in terms of the 50s or 60s or 40s. So that is frozen there. So what you're doing is keeping that alive. Is that your intention? Because there is a very tricky word, which is contemporary. And contemporary refers, okay, they're made today, but they don't look like today. They look modern in terms of period.
Yeah.
So is that, my first question is that your intentionality and your willingness to perpetuate that modernity, that you have a great heritage about that? And the second question, if you allow me, is it reminds me the art and craft movement in England, right?
Yeah.
Where the intentionality was very noble, but the reality cannot be, because we are feeding population, and that is when the furniture becomes a luxury. Because at the end of the day, the machine can produce 4 legs and a top. And so, how do you see that in your case? Is always going to be luxury by the romantic idea of the making? Or is aesthetic? How do you see that?
I will try to answer your question here. I would say that for me it's not about luxury. It's more about craftsmanship and doing things right. And it's not about, I like to get an old table. It doesn't need to be something expensive. It should just be well made. It's always about doing things right, doing things long lasting, doing things so it's well made. Of course, we don't need to be, I love machines, I love production, but it's where I come from in Copenhagen or in Denmark. If I want to do that, it's not. We have big machines, of course, but I don't want a factory. I want to just, do something I love. I can accept that, you produce things in a factory so long you do it nice, and so long you respect the materials. I think that's what's most important, and so things need to be long lasting when you do something. That's basically it. And then I would say about the designs, what I like to do with my designs or the things we take in our collection when we look at new designs is that I could try to pull them through time periods. So I try to pull them back, also try to push them forward to see would that fit. We all know that we got something in the 70s or 80s. There will be periods where you really just will throw all this out. They did that with vinyl furniture. That was just going in the bin. I picked some up when I was young in the 90s. And now, it goes on an auction for £10,000. And you would find that in the bin. But that's because at that time we didn't think that was long lasting. But now we think it is long lasting. So it's about that we need to accept that we buy things or get things that we think are well made. Then we will probably keep it. If we just get things 5 years, we'll have a turnover in 5 years, then it's worn down, we need another color, we need something else. I think we need to think about the way we buy things or we get things so we maybe just, buy one chair. I would say that's a bit naive, but maybe you buy 3 dining chairs during your life, so maybe one. This chair will go on to your kids, and maybe your grandkids also, if you take care of it. So it's all about that you have these pieces of furniture which actually can go through generations, and that could be made in a factory. That's all right for me. But that's not what we do and can do and want to do
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much for being here. Malte and Staffan, thank you so much. I've
thank you.
learned a lot today.
Thank you.